to early China, and I'm very pleased to introduce Jianjun He, Assistant Professor of Chinese Studies in the Department of Modern and Classical Languages, Literatures, and Cultures here at the University of Kentucky. You joined our faculty just this year, didn't you? Jianjun He received his PhD at the University of Oregon, and he has taught various places, including Western Kentucky University, and joined the faculty here at the University of Kentucky this fall. He's published a number of articles in the field of the literature and culture of early China, and as you can see on the screen, the title of his talk this morning is Another Frontier, the Body, Cultural Conflicts, and Foreign Policies in Han China.
Thank you. It is a great honor to participate in this symposium. When Dr. Popkin invited me, I wasn't quite sure if my paper would fit into this topic, taking in strangers. For two reasons. First is that my field is early China, which means I study everything happened before 2nd century CE. And although nobody can deny the possibility, but when you look at the materials, it is hard to find any evidence to support that in such an early time, there were a group of Jewish people came to China. And the second reason is that what I'm going to talk about is probably the opposite of offering hospitality to strangers, and but that is probably the beauty of being in the academia. That is, you're able to express, to listen to, and to appreciate different voices and opinions. So. For that reason, I accept this invitation, and I'm going to present a totally different attitude towards the people from other places. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is that in early China, people who are culturally different were often viewed as a threat that needed to be controlled. And this conceptualization of the cultural others and the strategy applied in taking care of them nevertheless helped early China to integrate its own cultural identity. It also created a sense of moral superiority that dominated Chinese foreign policy for near 2,000 years. From a very early time, Chinese culture has this distinction. This distinction has this dichotomy of nei, which means inside, and wai, which means outside, and it uses to distinguish us and the others. The Chinese imagination of the whole world precisely reflects this notion, as reported in this ancient book, Shangshu, Book of Antiquity, or Book of Documents. The whole world was centered upon the Zhou dynasty capital, the capital of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty ranged from 1046 to 256 BCE. And as you can see in this chart, the center is the capital, and extending out from the center, you see the 5 regions. So each region is 500 miles in distance. So from this capital extending out, all regions divided by 500 miles were labeled differently in accordance to their distance to the capital. The further the land, the less civilized the people. So what happened then if someone lives in an area that is beyond this 5 regions? So this is the center of civilization, and it goes left and left. And what happens here? That's purely, according to this book, that's purely the land of beasts and animals. So thus we see a highly hierarchical geographical division of the world based entirely upon each region's distance to the center. The closer the regions are, the more related their cultures to that of ours. In fact, if we examine the earliest written documents from the oracle bone inscriptions, so that the inscriptions carved on the shoulder bone of, for example, a deer or the turtle shell. That's the earliest inscriptions. So from the oracle bone inscriptions to the bronze inscriptions, we see a development of this emphasis between us and the others, as well as the emergence of derogative vocabularies created to mark the cultural others. For example, in the Shang dynasty, dated from 1766 to 1122 BCE, in the Shang dynasty oracle bone inscriptions, the neighboring communities or states was simply mentioned as Fang, which means directions or region. There are near 150 small or large Fangs recorded in oracle bone inscriptions. Some of these Fang were allies to the Shang people, some were their enemies, and some both fought against and befriended with the Shang people. However, almost all of them were called something Fang. And there's no derogative words used even for the most dangerous enemy of the Shang people. The Shang people also called themselves as the Shang Fang. It was when the next dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, the Zhou people become dominant, we see the emergence of the vocabulary identifying people as barbarians. For example, if you look at the Zhou bronze inscription, the neutral word Fang, which means direction or region, was replaced by a group of derogative words, such as, for example, this word is Di, means people from the north. This word is Man, which means the people live in the south. And this is Yi, people from the east. And if you look at the shape of all these words, and for example, this one, the people from north. This is a shape of a dog. And so the later the dictionary interprets the people as their descendants of dogs. And this one, you have this, ropes, height, and later on they add a character that is resembles worm, W-O-R-M. And the early dictionary interprets that those people from those Man people from the south, they are descendants of worms. And then this one in the middle, that's the shape of a human being. And this one is clearly a rope. That means you use a rope to tie them up. And this is a latter one, a latter shape. Early shape was simply a picture of the dead body. That means the enemy killed in the battlefield. And later on, they decided to capture them as slaves. So, and you see, when the Zhou replaced the Shang, you see a group of these derogative words or vocabularies created to identify those who live outside of China as the others. In order to promote their political legitimacy, the Zhou people claimed that they were descendants of the ancient Xia people. So Xia in Chinese means authority, orthodox. So they claimed that they were descendants of the ancient Xia people. And the Xia people was the dominant people before the Shang. They also created this notion of the mandate of heaven, arguing that their rule was granted by the will of heaven. In addition to this, Zhou expanded its territory and established many new settlements and colonies in the lands previously believed belonged to the Di people, the Man people, and the Yi people. All this new land they conquered, they set up settlements and colonies. And then the Zhou people found themselves living among those who were very different from them, and people who were often hostile towards the Zhou occupation. In order to consolidate their rule and expand their colony, the Zhou moved their own people to these new lands, and more importantly, they presented Zhou as a high culture that is better or superior to other culture neighboring with Zhou or surrounding the Zhou colonies. Ritual played an important role in Zhou cultural propaganda. Zhou highly emphasized Li, which means ritual or the rites, and prescribed many detailed ritual regulations to guide interactions among people. Ritual to Zhou people was absolutely performative. While using the body and the bodily movements to practice the ritual, the distinctive Zhou culture was displayed and was performed in order to create an awe among the cultural others. At the same time, by accepting the ritual and performing the ritual, Zhou people also acknowledged their shared cultural identity. Although the Western Zhou, the Zhou can be divided into two larger periods. Western Zhou dated from 1046 to 771 BCE. So the Western Zhou was forced to relocate its capital east because of the conquest of its capital by the Rong people. The Rong was another group of people come from the west. The cultural pride was continued during the Eastern Zhou, especially the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, dated from 770 to 221 BCE. And so this was continued during this period by those who called themselves Zhongguo, which means the Central States. Even though it was not undisputed, the sense of cultural superiority of China was generally accepted by Chinese people and their neighbors, at least as reported in Chinese historical texts. When the short-lived Qin dynasty from 221 to 206 BCE, when the Qin unified China in 221 BCE, it was at the upper hand when dealing with the nomads along its northern borders. The centuries-old tradition of the tributary system, in which China was only superpower, and others had to pay homage to her, was not seriously challenged from the Shang dynasty all the way down to the end of the Qin dynasty, 221 BCE. It was probably during the Han dynasty an equal relationship between China and the nomads was recognized when military defeats forced Han dynasty, which dated from 206 BCE to 220 CE. So when the military defeats forced Han China to engage into an appeasement policy with its formidable northern neighbor, the Xiongnu people, this acknowledgement of equal or stronger power of a culturally inferior other brought a fundamental impact on ancient China's foreign policy. Not only it forced Han elites to be creative and flexible in dealing with new foreign powers, but also the theories and the strategies they conceived served as diplomatical precedents for later generations over 2,000 years. In other words, Han China's Xiongnu policy opened a new page in the diplomatic history of pre-modern China. So my paper today attempts to investigate Han China's Xiongnu policy from a specific perspective, that is, the role ritual and the body played in Han China's Xiongnu relation. I argue that in the mind of the Han elites, the military strength of the Xiongnu resulted directly from their strong physical bodies. This awareness of the superior physique of the Xiongnu inspired the Han court to develop a bodily strategy in its foreign policy, that is, presenting an imposing Han body in its diplomatic encounters with the Xiongnu. The physical body thus immediately shouldered a political mission and was called upon to symbolize the power of Han China. So from the 1st century BC to the 3rd century, from 1st century BCE to 3rd century CE, when China was ruled by Han dynasty, its most feared rival was a nomadic group called Xiongnu that lived north and west to the Chinese territory. The rich northern Chinese plain provided these Xiongnu people a very indispensable source for wealth and luxurious goods. When winter storms or other natural disasters struck the steppeland and destroyed their fragile economy, those nomadic people would organize themselves and raid the Chinese border for food, livestock, and labor. The Chinese farmers had no chance to win when fighting with those warriors who grew up on horseback and are very good in archery. The Chinese infantry often proved incompetent in defeating the Xiongnu cavalry. In the mind of Han Chinese, the martial quality of the Xiongnu resulted from their strong physical bodies. And this awareness of the superior physique of the Xiongnu was repeatedly called to mind and reinforced by the terror of the Xiongnu's periodical attacks. What is interesting is that this consciousness of the physical inferiority inspired the Han court to develop this bodily strategy that I'm going to discuss here. For over 100 years, the Han court struggled to maintain peace with, as well as occasionally fight against its strong northern neighbors, the Xiongnu people. In 51 BCE, the Han court saw its first Xiongnu Shanyu, which means the chieftain of the Xiongnu. This Shanyu's name was Hu Hanye. So he arrived at the Han capital. The homage that the Shanyu paid to Han court was seen as a gesture of submission to the Han. To the Han government, Hu Hanye's submission in 51 BCE was unprecedented because never before had the Han seen a Xiongnu leader bring his nation for surrender. In order to deal with this new relationship, previous diplomatic policies for the Xiongnu had to be adjusted and a new strategy conceived. This is what I argue as the bodily politics, in which massive bodies of Han people were exhibited in order to impress the Shanyu. Here I cite a passage from an early text called Han Shu, the history of the Han dynasty, which shows the bodily politics in full display. So it begins saying that in the next year, Shan Yu made his presence known at the Wuyuan Pass and issued his intention to pay homage at the court on the New Year's of the 3rd year of the Ganlu reign. The Han sent the generals to receive him in each of the 7 commanderies, the provinces or states, through which the Shan Yu passed. The commandery cavalry of 2,000 horsemen were dispatched and displayed along the road. On the New Year's, the Shan Yu was received in audience by the emperor at this palace, treated with special ritual. It was ranked above noble prince, and then he was given a lot of gifts. As you can see, there's a long list. And so, and after the ceremony, the emperor sent envoys to lead the Shan Yu go first on the road. They were outside of the capital. So he lodged at this palace outside of capital. The emperor returned to Chiyang Palace from the Ganqian Palace. So he arrived at the Changping Palace and decreed that the Shan Yu should not go to him. And then all the Shan Yu's ministers on the left and right were allowed to observe in line, together with several tens of them kings and chiefs of various Man and Yi nations. They all welcomed the emperor beneath this bridge of the Wei River, standing along both sides of the road. The emperor ascended the bridge. All the people shouted, "Long live the emperor!" So, and in addition to listing the many gifts that the Han Emperor granted to the Xiongnu leader, the Hanshu narrative also highlights the great number of people that participated in this event. In each of the 7 commanderies through which the Shan Yu was to pass, 2,000 horsemen were dispatched to receive him. The number of troops was considerable, totaling 14,000 men and horses for the 7 commanderies. Traditionally, China measured its military strength by its large size of infantry and associated laborers and porters. Cavalry was a particular advantage of the Xiongnu nomads. In order to defeat the Xiongnu on the steppe, Emperor Wu had encouraged local officials to raise forces in the border area. However, the Han court has lost most of its forces in war during Emperor Wu's time against the Xiongnu. In this context, maneuvering 14,000 horsemen and dispatching them for a diplomatic reception instead of assembling them for battle was indeed an unusual effort on the part of the Han court. The dispatching of the troops was extremely costly. I have a footnote here to show how costly it would be, and I found a wooden slip dated back from the Han Dynasty. It's just about the border officials received an Han emissary who were traveling across the border with some of his associates. And the total cost for just this event was about 1,470 cash. And if we calculate from this, all these 14,000 horsemen will cost over than 1 million cash. So that's very expensive. And so the Chinese word "chen," which means to display, is used in the above passage to purposefully stress on the ceremonial function of the cavalry troops. The troops were used in order to make a visual impression rather than to secure the safety of the Shan Yu. The intention behind lining the road with 14,000 horsemen was to demonstrate China's might. Mounted on the back of horses, the bodies of the soldiers were taller and more awe-inspiring than infantry. Wearing armors and Han uniform, holding weapons, bars, and flag, soldiers' bodies become amplified, and in unit they represent the military strength of the Han. The bodies symbolize the military power of the nation. Another massive display of bodies was staged at the Wei River Bridge just outside of the capital, where a ceremony was held to welcome Emperor Xuan's return to the capital. The event was as dramatic as an extravagant Broadway show, with Emperor Xuan as the leading actor and the Xiongnu people as his audience. The Hanshu description says that the Xiongnu leader and his companions was sent to Changping, a place near the Han capital, before the Han Emperor returned. Like any audience of the play, they waited outside of the theater for the show to start. The Han Emperor returned to the Chiyang Palace and ascended the upper bank of the river. At this high place, he granted the Xiongnu leader status as a distinguished guest and permitted other Xiongnu nobles the right of observation. Then the opening of the show was announced. The narrative then drew our attention to the stage. Several tens of thousands of non-Chinese chieftains, kings, and lords acting en masse in supporting roles were lined up along the road and waited beneath the river bridge for the entry of the Han Emperor. Again, the Emperor ascended the bridge and all the people on the stage saluted to him, shouting, "Your Majesty." It is clear the visual effect of this ceremonial performance was extraordinary. More bodies, both of the Han people and the non-Han people, were displayed, and they were elaborately positioned either at a lower place beneath the bridge or at circumambient locations, such as along the side of the road. The high and central position was reserved for the Chinese emperor. Ascending the bridge, the emperor was highest of all and the only one whose physical gesture was decidedly masculine, because thousands of others had to bend their body humbly before him. They ritually displayed powerlessness. The power of the Han emperor is demonstrated by the fact that he could command people, especially non-Han people, to prostrate their bodies in front of him. A distinguished feature of this was that the Xiongnu was not only the audience, they were part of the show as well. They had to bend themselves to show submission. In 25 BCE, another Xiongnu leader, the Fuzhou Ruodi Shanyu, who was the son of this Xiongnu leader, rendered homage to the Han court. This event provided an opportunity for the court to impress the Shanyu with the able body of the Han official. Instead of a massive display, this time the power of Han China was symbolized by the Prime Minister Wang Shang's body. And here's a passage from the Han Shu, the same text. This articulates how the Xiongnu leader was frightened and psychologically defeated by Wang Shang's great physical appearance. It says, as a person, Wang Shang was substantial and dignified. He was more than 8 chi high, and his body was tall and large. It looks far surpassed others. In the 4th year of the Heping era, the Shanyu came to the court and was presented to the emperor at the Baihu Hall. And Prime Minister Shang sat in center of the court. So this court is large. It's near probably a half size of a football field. And he was sitting there, and the Shanyu came forward to pay respect to him. Wang Shang stood up, left his table and talked with the Shanyu. Looking up at his feature, the Shanyu greatly feared him, turned around and retreated. The emperor heard this and sighed. This is a true prime minister of Han. So here again we see the choreographic strategy in Han-Xiongnu relations. The Shanyu was led to this Baihu Hall where he would be received in audience by the Han emperor. Just as his father was accompanied by 14,000 horsemen on his journey to the capital, this new Xiongnu leader had to encounter Wang Shang before he saw the Han emperor, where the Shanyu was led into the palace as a guest. Wang Shang sat in the center of the court. In this scene, the two men were unequal because Wang Shang possessed a dominant position, the center of the court as both a spatial and a political center. The bodily gesture of the two men also established Wang Shang's superior status. He sat and waited the Xiongnu to come to him. This distinction between the body language became more explicit when we read that Wang Shang did not stand up, and the narrative then focused on the Shan Yu's reaction to Wang Shang's body. The Shan Yu had to look up at Wang Shang. The different heights of the two men determined the power relation between them. Wang Shang's able body caused the Shan Yu to greatly fear, and he returned and moved backward. It dared not to challenge Wang Shang and therefore did not pass him. We have no record of any conversation. There was no performance of grand court rituals. The competition between the leaders of the two nations was condensed in this Hanshu into a physical confrontation between two men. The Shan Yu's physical appearance was not at all described in the narrative, yet it is clear that he was no match to Wang Shang. The martial quality of the nomadic people was thus negated by the awesome body of the single Chinese minister. Emperor Cheng's word announced the accomplishment of the bodily politics in suppressing the nomadic threats. This above choreography of the bodily politics in Emperor Cheng's reign was in sharp contrast to an episode in early time of the Han Dynasty when Han was ruled by Empress Lu, in which the body was also used as political component, but in a very different way. At the peak of his power, the Xiongnu leader, the Mo Dun Shan Yu, demanded in a letter not only material goods from China, but also the marital hands of the ruler of China, Empress Lu. So the Xiongnu leader simply wrote a letter saying that I'm single, you are single, why don't we hang out? And so furious was Empress that she wanted to attack the Xiongnu. She soon realized that China's military force was no match to the nomadic cavalry and sent a letter to the Xiongnu leader begging for peace. In the letter, she wrote that my age is advanced and my vitality is weakening. Both my hairs and my teeth are falling out. I cannot even walk steadily. The Shan Yu must have heard exaggerated reports. I'm not worthy of his lowering himself, but my country has done nothing wrong, and I hope he will spare it. And although the description of her body was probably exaggerated, such an old and weak and unattractive body symbolized the submissive and unthreatening stance of her nation. From the weak and vulnerable Empress Lu to the strong and awe-inspiring Wang Shang, the changing image of the body show us the change of the role in the power relationship between China and the Xiongnu. The growing strength of Han China was demonstrated by the able body of its soldiers and ministers. So the political symbolism and practicability of the body had a long tradition before Han China. In pre-Qin texts, notions of perfecting the body and creating an awe-inspiring demeanor in order to govern the people were repeatedly articulated. The body also mattered in the Qin and Han China. In Han Dynasty, the body was even used as a legal measure. This is evident in some Qin legal documents recently discovered in the 1970s. Some of the documents dealing with minor crimes and relevant punishment. These cases show us that a child or a teenager's height instead of his age was used as a standard in deciding the level of punishment. The Qin Dynasty law carefully distinguished hard labor as big and small and allots them different workloads and food. In the documents titled 18 Qin Laws, it writes that if a bond servant or a wall builder is shorter than 6 chi and 5 cun high, shorter than 5 feet, and a bondwoman or a grain pounder does not reach to 6 feet and 8 inches, they should be defined as small. If they are higher than 4 feet, they have to do labor. Otherwise, if you are not tall enough, you don't have to do hard labor. And height also determines whether a teenager is eligible for legal punishment. Let me just give you a quick example. Here is from the documents about two minor crimes. And they have committed some crimes, but their punishment was different because of the height. One is lower than 4 feet, no punishment. The other was when he stoned the ox. He was not that tall, but now he grew. He was over that tall, so he was punished. So in both cases, height rather than age determines legal responsibility and the level of punishment to a young adult. And although the Han Dynasty did not adopt such this using height as a legal standard from the Qin Dynasty, the body was still an important administrative measure for the government. And in the border area called Jianjun, there's some Han document was discovered which provide first-hand material for investigating the Han administrations in this frontier area. Among the civil and military records found in Jiyan, body features play a significant part in Han registration of its people for the purpose of border control. There are basically two types of documents. One is about military personnel, the other is people travel across the border. And if you look at the records, you will see that no matter this for the military personnel or for the people who travel, the record will put on their name, where they're from, and also their height and their skin colors. And so the Han government's practical use of the body in administration was extended in its relationship with other nations. In Han diplomatic affairs, the body was no longer viewed as a feature of individual identity. Instead, it served as a cultural sign identifying people from different ethnic groups. Han court elites seemed to feel that the strategy of using bodies to affect the bodily politics was most important and efficient in dealing with the most dangerous group of people, the Xiongnu nomads. And a Han minister by the name of Yang Xiong, his memorial to Emperor Ai illustrates this. So the background of Yang Xiong's memorial can be summarized as the following. In 3 BCE, a Xiongnu leader requests to come to visit the Han court the next year. The Han Emperor Ai has been sick at that time. Some of his officials said that the Xiongnu brought ill omen to China, since every time a Xiongnu leader come to the Han capital, a Han emperor died. When I read this, I saw this cannot be true, but I checked the record. It was true. So every time after Han Xiongnu leader left the Han capital, the Han emperor died. Not because of the visit, but for many reasons. But people in the past time, they were very superstitious. So Emperor Ai therefore did not want to invite the Xiongnu leader to visit. So his minister Yang Xiong sent a memorial arguing against this. And in the memorial, Yang Xiong first looked back on the past Han Xiongnu history, pointing out that using only military force to control the Xiongnu was a failed one. It didn't work. In the current situation, the Xiongnu had already submitted themselves to the court, and thus, in Yang Xiong's opinion, China must secure their loyalty through conquering their heart. As Yang Xiong articulates, the body weighted heavily in the overall equation. He simply says that they are irascible and ruthless, the body tall and strong, rely on their strength, can't be civilized. And in the past, we have attacked them, but it didn't work. So this passage stresses again the different physique of the Xiongnu that was highlighted from a Han Chinese view. The Xiongnu, they were taller and stronger than the Chinese and had more martial qualities. The Han elites gradually realized a bodily culture that was treasured by the Xiongnu people. The Xiongnu were proud of their strength and admired those who were even more powerful than them. With such an understanding, Yang Xun suggests a court must deploy the dignified, awe-inspiring body and empowering the bodily performance to conquer the hearts of the Xiongnu. His advice was accepted by Emperor Ai. 2 years later, when the Xiongnu leader finally came to the court, he again was confronted by the able bodies of the Han ministers. There is an anecdote in a Han document demonstrates the current of this bodily strategy. It's about this minister, Peng Hong. He was the grand administrator of the Yunyang commandery in Emperor Ai's reign and was famous among the people at the border. His looks and capacity for eating and drinking were peerless. At the time when the Shan Yu came to pay homage to the court officials, ranking 2,000 shi, that's a rank, probably governor of a province, and having outstanding looks and a great capacity for eating and drinking, were chosen to be the governor of the commanderies through which the Shan Yu passed. For this reason, Peng Hong was transformed to the Grand Minister of the Yunzhong commandery. So he was transformed from a remote place into a large, very important commandery because of his ability to drink and eat. And so the strategy we see in this event resembled that which was used in Hu Hanye's time. The only difference was instead of a massive display of the horsemen's body, Han officials' bodies were presented along the road. Not only did these grand bodies show the power of China, but also they cover up the weak and sick body of the emperor. Emperor Ai was physically weak through his life. Using the bodily politics to conquer the nomadic people was by no means Yang Xun's personal insight. On the contrary, it was a general belief among the court elites of the Han. For example, a Han minister, Du Shi, praised his colleague Fu Chan's outstanding looks as the illustration of the greatness of the nation. In Emperor Ming's era, Han minister Cheng Gong was so admired by the Xiongnu that a Xiongnu leader even sent an emissary to the Han court to express the intention to meet this Han official in person. The emperor decreed this minister Cheng Gong to dress up to meet the emissary, but he refused. And he told the emperor that he was ugly and should not be seen by foreigners. He then suggested the emperor to choose a minister who was tall and of dignified appearance to meet the Xiongnu. The emperor therefore replaced him with another court official. Politicizing the body has a deep root in early Chinese court culture and was adopted by the Han government in controlling the Xiongnu. When the previous marriage alliance policy and the military campaign proved unsuccessful or incompetent in dealing with the changing relationship with the nomads, the Han court developed this bodily politics and applied it with the use of material subsidy to secure the loyalty of these people. This new strategy resulted also from Han elites' improved understanding of the Xiongnu culture as articulated in Yang Xun's words. The lessons learned and the knowledge accumulated from past experience and encountering with the Xiongnu urged Han court elites to be more creative and practical in making their foreign policies. The bodily politics seems to be a successful strategy to the court elites. They repeatedly used it to conquer the Xiongnu's heart. In Han foreign policies, the politicized body of Han people become a powerful means, maybe stronger than weapon made of iron, in Han China's control of the Xiongnu. This is my presentation. Thank you very much.